After 3 years of working on rezoning the village centers, the Newton City Council voted in favor of a new zoning ordinance for the Village Center Overlay District by a vote of 21 in favor. Councilors Leary and Noel voted against, and Councilor Ryan was absent. The revised plan calls for only 6 of the 13 villages to be affected: Newton Center, Newton Highlands, Waban, West Newton, Newtonville, and Auburndale. In order to get the new zoning passed, Councilors Gentile and Albright worked all weekend to put forth 4 amendments to the most recent VCOD plan.
My intention was for 10 and 11, because they're all in West Newton, to be considered the first amendment for this evening, and it's numbers 10 and 11. And it's to zone the following sections on the north side of Washington Street, VC2, and the sections are, and I believe that these have been indicated on the maps that are in front of you tonight. Yes. So Washington Street from Elm Street to Cherry, the west side of Waltham Street to Washington Street, and Washington Street West to Corner Cleaners, the CVS and the gas station lots, Washington Street Davis Hotel Block, and Davis Court to Kempton Place, all on the north side. On the south side in West Newton, the south side of Washington Street from Highland to Chestnut Street be reduced from VC3 to VC2. That covers West Newton and is meant to be the first amendment offered tonight. The second is at the top of the next page. It's number 12 from Gentile and Albright. It's a text amendment which would require 0.5 parking spaces per unit for every VC lot over 20,000 square feet. Number 13 is Gentile and Albright zone whatever parcels that are currently proposed as VC3 or VC2 zones, this is in Auburndale, to all be VC2, and to remove the MRT in Auburndale. And then the last one is a text amendment to be eligible for the additional story bonus through an affordable housing project. The project shall be no less than 50% affordable. And that summarizes the 4 amendments that President Albright and I would like to offer this evening.
Ms. Kyra, could you just inform us where we ended up the last time, or where we start tonight with the number of units, and where this would bring us?
Yes, 1 second. While I'm looking at that, I just wanted to clarify, I understood the affordability bonus to just apply to VC3. Is it also applying to VC2?
Just VC3.
Okay, thank you. So we started at about 9,400. And these changes would bring us down to about 8745.
I want to say that this was a really good and thoughtful and deliberative process that got us to where we are today. The Zoning and Planning Committee has been working on this for many years, largely for some of the same reasons why the state actually passed the law that many of us, or all of us, I think, support complying with. And that is to say that there is a housing crisis. We recognize that there was a housing crisis. We also recognize that it was good policy to build that housing in and around village centers and points of transportation. There were a lot of amendments that came during this process from opponents of the plan that were adopted and that were accepted and made good sense. I thought the process was really good, and I actually thought the plan was really good. And then we had an election. And the election made it clear that a lot of the voters in this city didn't like the plan, didn't like the direction that we were headed, and thought it was too much too fast. So I have heard that voters were misled. I've heard that those of us who think it was a good plan should sort of forge onward. I feel similarly to that sentiment the way I did about the legalization of marijuana vote that took place, which is that we have to assume that voters are acting in an informed way. They know what they're doing and they acted deliberately. And so that's why when the vote to bifurcate this and remove some of the village centers came up, I supported that. not because I thought we were protecting those villages by removing them from the plan, but because I understood that the voters wanted to move more slowly on this, and that we had an opportunity potentially to pilot this zoning reform in some of our villages, and then we can see if it works or doesn't work and look at the remaining villages. And then Auburndale came up. And I think folks know, we have all heard about Auburndale. For those who don't know exactly what's going on, there are commuter rail upgrades that are potentially at issue. And the reason they are at issue is because to upgrade the commuter rail, there is state funding and there is federal funding. It's about a $170 million project, and half and half, 85 million of that is state money. The legislature has bonded that money, approved bonding for that money, but the administration, the state administration, has to actually spend that money. And as I think we've all seen, there was a recent study that the transportation infrastructure, the MBTA, needs over $24 billion worth of attention. So the state has to prioritize the money that they've been authorized to bond. And the state has made clear that housing is their #1 priority. And so it was made clear to us that if we don't rezone in and around Auburndale, the state administration, the Healy administration, will lower that area on their prioritization list. And again, with the massive amounts of needs, it puts the funding at risk. So that became a top priority for me. We could not rezone. That would be a gamble in and around Auburndale. And by the way, I'm a gambler, okay? Like if anyone wants to go hit Encore, I'm your man. You wanna roll the dice, you wanna play blackjack, I'm your man. But I also know 2 things about gambling. 1, you don't gamble with other people's money. And 2, you only gamble what you're willing to lose. I'm not willing to give up the transportation infrastructure upgrades along the commuter rail, and I don't want to gamble with other people's use of the commuter rail. So it became a top priority for me, like it was for Congressman Frank, Congressman Kennedy, Congressman Auchincloss, State Senator Cream, State Representatives Kahn, Balzer, Katusian, and Lon, who have all supported that funding, and I don't want to put that funding at risk. In short, the package that is before us includes Auburndale, does some things with which I disagree, but the nature of legislating and working in a deliberative body is that you compromise. And so I'm willing to accept some of those things to get the things that are very important to me, which is passing a plan that I still think is really good, includes Auburndale, and makes a lot of improvements to our city. So I'm going to support this package. Thank you.
I would rather have been able to speak at the outset about what I think is good about this ordinance. The ordinance itself is largely intact. So you may use it, if you have the wherewithal to do that, over next term or the following term, to expand the map as you learn from what this is and as you see how much is being denied to 6 of our village centers and how much we've drawn this back. There is a lot that's good in this. It is beginning to restore what was allowed in this city, although without such a clear set of rules and such a good set of rules, up until 1987. And it's allowing in the MRT district, which is very limited at this point, what was allowed up until 1953, approximately. That is 3-family and up by right, which has been denied to all in Newton since 1987, cut back in 1983. That's really extremely important in our city and in our time where we have this serious housing crisis. And we have this existential climate crisis, which is where it has become necessary for us as a community, as a commonwealth, as a nation, to understand how our development patterns have strangled us. We spread out all over the place, use a ton of resources in doing so, wipe out many more forests, instead of allowing more compact multifamily development near our goods and services, near our transit, which is how New England villages once developed. We're moving back in that direction. We're moving the needle with this, and I'm proud of that. And boy, I don't know why it had to take almost 3 years to do a better plan, a much better plan, in order to get this piece of it. But I am very pleased that we're getting the piece of it. I'm pleased that that the MBTA communities law came along, despite the fact that we had to fight so hard on 2 lengthy occasions to get them to count the kinds of units that we wanted them to count first, to allow us to use our IZ ordinance, our deeper affordability, our more units than what the state was going to allow. Second, mixed use is everything. Mixed use is everything in a village center. You can't have only residential. So we got them to allow us to count the units above required retail. What I'm concerned about in this package is not as much the villages we're leaving out, but the reduction of a 4.5-story building to a 3.5-story building, where, as others have said, we know that we're on the cusp of economic feasibility, not profit, feasibility. This is what the state was worried about when they put those rules in place about the IZ ordinance and about the requirement for first floor retail. Housing developers, whether profit-making or nonprofit, but especially if they're providing a larger share of lower income housing, do not want to put retail on the ground floor. And they require more building in order to help defray the costs of doing that initially and over time. And we just are very much less sure now that we're going to be able to meet the bar on the state requirement there. In Arlington, I reread the article that Arlington put forward, it was written about Arlington by Andrew Brinker this morning. And they had a blood and guts fight over this, and then overwhelmingly passed a compromise package. But their package was overwhelmingly 3 and 4 stories, but then if you offered a degree of affordable housing more or required retail on the ground floor, you had 5 or 6 stories that were allowed by right. So I'm worried that you might have to be revisiting this early in the new year in order to make the economics work, because I don't know if you remember, but when we got permission to count units above retail, we added 2,000 units. So at that moment, we promptly, in committee, worked to narrow the scope of the map to take 2,000 units out, plus I think another 700, because we were working over the summer to narrow the scope. We had people coming in asking for us to dramatically expand, especially the MRT district. We roundly said no, thinking we wanted to start off with something more modest. There are going to be people, I believe, coming in and wanting this zoning from whom it has now been taken away from the earlier version, or just as we begin to see what good can come from it.
Sure. So the next step is we have to actually submit our application for compliance to the state by the end of this year. So we'll need the certified copy of the ordinance, whatever is ultimately voted on, and then we rerun the full model, and we have to submit the GIS map files, the Excel model, with our application. We're also waiting on our economic feasibility analysis that's currently underway, and then that all gets submitted as one package to the state. We don't have a time frame from them for the turnaround for review. They will be getting, hopefully, all 12 rapid transit community applications probably around the same time at the end of the year. But we will certainly keep this council posted once that application's in and as we hear anything back from the state.